Everyone who has an email account knows what junk email is, and usually just dumps it once or twice a week without looking at it. For me, it became one of those New Year resolutions you make that you have no intention of keeping. My wife and I were out with a group of friends to celebrate and witness the new year coming in when during a band break, we all decided to share our New Year's resolutions. Most had the same old type that dealt with becoming a better person, or to get themselves in better physical shape by losing so many pounds. Mine was to cut down the amount of junk mail I received by 75%. Someone said good luck with that, your email address is sold to anyone and everyone who will pay for it. It became the joke of the night because everyone thought it was the most stupid New Year's resolution they had heard of. By the end of the night, they were betting amongst themselves how long I would last. Their constant teasing of me got me mad, even though I thought it best not to show them that. I made a point to make sure I would be able to prove them wrong. So here I was on New Year's Day, sitting in front of my computer, starting the unending journey of unsubscribing from all these unwanted emails. It was complicated because I had 3 email addresses all coming into my Outlook account. I had to move each file from the junk folder to the inbox, then delete it after unsubscribing 3 times. I thought it was going to be an easy task to do, but the reality was a different matter. Some you couldn't unsubscribe to, others, when attempted, took you to another website, and those you could. In my case, I had to do each email address separately because some did not reveal who it was sent to. I had gone through 2 cups of coffee and about 40 junk emails when I got hit with an email that just did not make sense. It read, "Instagirls, we found one match for you today within 10 miles. It had a picture of a lady with a line that underneath it that read, "I just want you hot and ready laying naked beside me tonight. Hit contact to start towards a connection right now." I couldn't deal with it till I figured things out in my mind. I just stuck in archives for now and continue on with what I was doing until I heard my better half stirring. For her, it was not a good morning as she was hungover. After getting her a couple of painkillers and a couple of anti-inflammatory pills, I got her back to bed. I made myself a fried egg sandwich and ate it before checking on her to make sure she was asleep. I went back to work on cleaning up my junk folder. Over the next 3 hours, I had gone through 120 of these emails. I now had 3 of these Instagirl emails archived. Each one had a different picture of a female, but all had the same message. The problem was that I recognized the faces of the 3 ladies whose pictures were provided. One was my wife's, and the others were my wife's long-term 2 best female friends since they met while attending Penn State. The emails used their image, but not their names. To me, it gave me something to start investigating. I looked at myself and my wife's 2 best friends' husbands. We all had jobs that required us to be away from home during the nighttime hours with scheduled hours that changed every week depending on how our employers set them. I, for example, worked 4 on 3 off, then 3 on with 4 days off. I ended up with 4 hours of overtime every pay period at least, which was 2 weeks. I took a break because I needed to get some rest. My shift at the plant started at 8 p.m. tonight and would end at 8 the next morning. During that time, I would spend the time behind the welder's mask. At $30 an hour, it was a decent living considering where we lived, so we were not having any money problems. As I was leaving the plant the next day, I asked one of my coworkers who was computer savvy how I could save a bunch of junk emails that I was suspicious of so that none of the embedded data would be lost. He suggested I send a copy to a stick that could not be erased. He explained that by doing that it would be like it had been on the computer all along. I stopped off at Best Buy on my way home. A store clerk directed me to what I wanted. After purchasing it, I went home. I knew that Sue Ellen, my wife of 5 years, would have gone to the gym for her daily workout with her lady friends. That was their routine every weekday and had been since they left Penn State. I worked on the junk folder until noon before heading to bed. I had found 6 more emails showing the same thing. With the 3 in archives, I transferred the 9 to the new stick. I was just about to head to bed to get some sleep when the plant called. The nighttime shift plant manager had given his notice and would be leaving at the end of the month. His position required him to work the evening shift 5 days a week, and it was a salaried position. The week went from Sunday to Thursday. It had a starting salary of $125,000 a year. I was asked if I wanted it. I said yes. Every day for the next 3 weeks, I worked faithfully on my junk files that kept getting less and less. My collection of the ladies' Instagirls emails had grown by an average of 6 a day. On the 3rd Sunday, we had Sue Ellen's best female friends and husbands over for dinner. I was beginning to get suspicious. During that evening, I took a current picture of the 3 ladies together, making sure I took close-ups of their faces. I had 8 days left before I started my new position. I wanted the close-up of the 3 best female friends for a personal reason. During the meal, I announced to all in attendance the news of my promotion and that I would be off from Thursday to Sunday this coming week to allow me time to prepare for the new schedule. Everyone congratulated me, including my wife. I noticed a change in her mood as soon as I revealed it. I figured it was because I was forcing a change in her routine and there was nothing else to it. What the three ladies did not know was that I had obtained pictures of their school days at the University of Pennsylvania as undergraduates. Those images of them from back then matched what was shown in the emails from Instagirls. At that time, I was wondering why and knew that I did not have the means to prove or disprove it. Wednesday, I disclosed to my wife that I had to go into a meeting on Thursday for orientation concerning my new situation. I had to be there by 10 and did not know how long I would be. I did that to give her a sense of security. Little did she know that my appointment was at the field office of the FBI located over by the city's only mall. I was going to them to hopefully find the truth behind those Instagirls emails. The field officer at the local FBI office was a very nice lady. I noted that she wore no wedding ring. She introduced herself as Ruth Susan Truscott. Ruth was about my age and a real beauty. Even dressed professionally, you knew she was hot. With hazel eyes, long brown hair, a nice full ripe lips for me if I was single. She could be what would be my daydreams. I thought for a moment that she might not be a straight. I explained to her my story as I knew it and what brought myself here before her. She said, "They are all emails linked to an offshore adult graphic ring that we have been trying to get a link into in order to shut them down. You're not the first that has brought these to our attention." "Then I might have the link you need," I explained. "The 3 emails I have are of 3 particular ladies whose picture being used is from their Penn University days. I have over 3 weeks of these emails on the stick. I'm here because the 3 ladies are my wife and her 2 friends." Ruth's eyes lit up as I handed her my stick. It was as if I had excited her for some reason. She said, "You can't be serious. These emails, 3 weeks of them, I found in my junk mail over the last month. Each one is sent from a different email address, but the message is the same. You will also find a recent photo of the 3 ladies, their maiden names, their legal address, and their married names," I said as I handed her the stick. "I have also provided you with their birth dates and social security numbers because I was so concerned. I also made sure I got their current image as close as possible to how they were posed in the yearbooks. Do you realize what a break this might be for us?" she said as she uploaded their university pictures into a face recognition program. It took about 3 minutes until the computer declared that they had a match on all 3. "Jack Daniel Patterson, you nailed it," Ruth said. "These 3 ladies have been on our watch list for years. Until today, we have not been able to link their images to anyone who was real. The first thing we will do is a background check on all 3 of these ladies to see what we can find. It may be nothing more than stolen images being used with false names. If that is the case, I can let you know within days." "With the history of Penn State," I said, "we can't be sure. I would appreciate it if you could keep me informed." "Is your cell phone linked with your wife's?" she asked. "No, but I do have a second number on it that she doesn't know about," I explained. "My employer has just set it up as a confidential contact for me and upper management." "Then that's the one I will contact you on," she said. "When I have questions I need to have answered or further news." After I gave it to her, I said, "Make a note to remind yourself to only call me in the AM. At noon it's shut off so I can sleep because I work midnights." "What do you for a living, may I ask?" Ruth said. "Until this week, I was an industrial welder working a 12-hour shift," I said. "Starting this coming Sunday, I am the new night shift plant manager." Ruth smiled and said, "Is that the Overton Farm Equipment Company that builds all kinds of horse trailers, flatbeds, and truck trailers?" "Yes," I said in total surprise. "How did you know?" "My stepfather is the man you're replacing," she explained. "Mom and he bought a Casey's convenience store to run. After 20 years, he's looking forward to having a normal life with normal hours." After leaving, I went to the bank to arrange a new account. With the bank's account rep's help, I was able to redirect my new payroll check into it and arrange to have my current net pay amount transferred into our regular account for now. I did it because I was worried about what the FBI would find out, because my gut was telling me that there was more to this situation than anybody knew. Most will never know how wrong I wished it was. I began to suspect my thoughts about my wife and her girlfriends might be right, because my wife was not her normal self for the next 4 days. She was short, standoffish, and moody. My change in plans had caused problems for her. Her conduct was proving that. The problem was that she couldn't explain why to me. That only served to create doubt, because so far in our relationship, I'd thought she had been honest. Sunday at 7, as I headed out the door towards working my first shift as a manager, I noticed a change in my wife's attitude. Just before I headed out the door, she decided she needed to have a quick shower. Her explanation was that she felt she needed to be completely clean for the night. It left me wondering why. I stopped at an older neighbor's place at the end of the cul-de-sac on the way to work and asked him if he was up to paying attention as to when my wife left and returned for a week or two. He agreed to because it would help motivate him to try readjusting his sleeping pattern. Since his last hospital stay, it had been the pits. With that done, I headed on in. It had been 2 weeks since I had stopped in at my neighbor's place, so that Sunday when I stopped in to see him, he was ready. He had done a detailed list of dates, time she left, and time she returned. In general, they showed that she left between 8 and 9 at night 4 nights a week and returned between 2 and 4 the following morning. More importantly, it established a pattern of behavior I felt needed looking into. His house was perfect for what he had done for me. It sat at the corner of our little subdivision at a 3-way set of lights. There was only one way in and out. Since the company I worked for had set up an email account in their computer system for me internally, I made out an email detailing what I had found out and how I had learned it and sent it to the email address Ruth had on the card I had been given. I then sent Ruth Susan Truscott a text message telling her to look for an email from me relaying the address from which I had sent it. I was sitting at home bright and early working on trying to get rid of more junk email that Monday morning when a call came through on my work phone number. My wife Sue Ellen was with her lady friends at the gym. "Good morning, Jack," Ruth said. "Thanks for the information. I need to know the hours the other 2 husbands work because we want to tail their wives too. George works for St. Francis Hospital as a male nurse." I replied. "Ben is a state trooper. The only other thing I can say, they both work nights like me. All 3 of us work 12-hour shifts." "Sounds like you have found some things out." "We have," Ruth said. "I can't say much more than that because it's still too early in the investigation. I can say that you and your friends are the 3 blind mice. For now, for all concerned, it's best it stays that way." Her words got me thinking about my wife and my relationship down through the years. Sue Ellen and I had met just after she relocated here to work on her first romance novel. I have to admit she made a good living writing romance stories for the online market and brought in as much as I did. Sue Ellen, or Susie as she preferred to be called, was, and still is, a very classy lady. For those from the deep south, she was the Gentile type. A little too much feminine in nature to attract my attention, so I never paid her any mind that first time I had met her at my parents' house. Susie was my parents' new neighbor 1 farm over. I had dropped in unexpectedly because I wanted to borrow my father's old scythe to cut down the 5-foot-high yard of weeds and grass on a piece of property outside of town that I had bought with the bank's help via a tax sale. Since the owner had died, I had gotten the title of it right away. It was my idea to clean it up and resell it in my spare time. The 28-acre piece of property was impressive. Most of the land was made up of rolling treed hills. It was perfect. I just wanted to clean up the front and backyard before I checked out the rest of the place. I had been working at it for about 2 hours. I had just pulled my truck into the driveway and started cutting it down from there. Anything I uncovered, I piled it in front of the truck, planning to deal with it later. So far, it hadn't been anything major. Susie pulled in beside my truck driving a fairly new version of the Beetle. Sticking a fancy, very wide-rimmed hat on her head, she stepped out of her car. I stopped what I was doing and approached her. "What can I do for you, Ms. Rowe?" I asked as I placed the hand tool against the side of my truck. She smiled as she handed me a Coke as she said, "Are you always this stern to the young ladies you just met?" "Yep, it makes it quite obvious to most females right away that I'm not marriage material," I said. "Saves us both a bunch of bullshit we both don't need." "Perhaps you're just reading me wrong," she quipped back. "I could be here for another reason." "The only way that could be true," I said, "was if you were coming from Sunday morning service and you were going door to door to get your service hours in. Maybe that's it, you're a religious person." "Well, I was at your mother's, as you well know, and she can get kind of preachy," Susie said. "She asked me to drop off some lunch to you and something for you to drink." I laughed, and after taking it from her hands, I put in the box of the truck. "She also said I had to verify for her that you ate it," she said. I wanted to swear, but I didn't. So I picked it up, dropped the tailgate, and started to eat the egg salad sandwiches. Susan Ellen started to laugh and said, "When you get pissed off, you show it without saying a word. I think it's cute." "She's got to learn I declared my independence years ago," I said, "and stop trying to play her matching-making games. She always picks females with an attitude that has high maintenance coming through by their image," I said. "Not worth a salt when going through tough periods." That's how it all started. When she left, I thought she would not be back, but I was wrong. My mother told her about my work schedule. The next time, Sue Ellen showed up driving a nice-looking Ford truck in blue jeans and started working with me. She had bought a brand new brush cutter, which when we figured out how it worked, it cut down the cleanup time drastically. After we had cleaned up the yard, we went inside the house to see if it was worth salvaging or not. It wasn't. "What are you going to do with this?" Susie asked as we were touring the house. This would cost less to tear down than to fix. That was my impression when I bid on it, I said. Now that the main yard is cleaned up, I will have it surveyed and parceled out. If laid out right, I will have one main road down the middle, with 4 cul-de-sacs running off of it. The lot with the biggest piece of land with it, I will keep for myself. So, you're going to subdivide it, Susie said in surprise. Then build a new home for yourself? That's the idea, because that way I should have no mortgage, I said. It will make the cost of raising a family a lot easier. But first I have to see if I can sell the timber. It was she that got us going for our first date, because I still wasn't interested. She just kept checking for me to see if I was here working on the place. Sue Ellen just was not my type. But she was persistent and kept chasing me. It was over a year later that we got married. Her second romance novel was a constant seller in the online book market. I read a part of it and thought it was nothing but a female smut book. Based on what I now knew, it didn't make sense because she did not act like that in our own bedroom. Until now, I had thought it was a great imagination, but now I was not so sure. I was asking myself what she was doing and who was she doing it with on her nights out. I had asked her numerous times what she did while I was working, and she had explained she was doing research or working on her next novel. Since she had incorporated, her writing was owned by the corporation, so the tax rate was a lot less because of where she set it up. I worked hard for what I did. She could sit at home and type it into the computer. Now looking back, I was trying to figure out why she and her 2 friends had moved to this region in the first place. It didn't make sense because none of them had family here unless it wasn't their choice. It got me thinking for a couple of days about the detail in her characters and the smut books she was writing. Since the major female character could be her, were the men she wrote about former lovers or current ones. It was while I was working on cleaning up more junk mail that it clicked. The name of the girl in the Instagirl email was the name of the major female character in her books. The next question I had to ask myself is, would it be something the FBI might find interesting? Using my home computer, I copied and posted a web address in an email to my work account that would lead anyone to the page where her books were offered from. That night I sent an email to Ruth Susan Truscott. In it, I explained that these were the 7 books she had published from the time I met her until now by using a pen name. I believe the main female character is her. So could these actually be a diary of her lovers or John's? I pointed out that the male subjects were so detailed in the descriptions that they came across as real. Since the males in her book were all esteemed in their community and considered the cream of the crop, could she be using real persons as fictional characters? If she read the books, she would learn that each book was like a chapter in an ongoing story. The books all dealt with a married woman's ongoing sexual relationship with the 5 men in her life. Each of the men she slept with provided her with a different kind of sexual satisfaction, each one having an ongoing relationship with her without knowing about the other. I sent her a text message letting her know about the email. It did not surprise that I got no response from Ruth. As she had said, Sue Ellen's friends' husbands and I are the 3 blind mice. Since I hadn't heard back from her, I figured that what I was thinking might be right. I had no choice but to play the waiting game. It was 6 months later on a Thursday morning, I came out of the plant to discover Ruth Truscott waiting for me. It was the first time I had seen her dressed in blue jeans. Ruth was definitely my kind of woman, healthy with a bit of meat on her bones, built for comfort more than speed. Dining at her why would be a pleasure. I got someone to drop me off, Jack, Ruth said. We need to have a long private chat somewhere where we can't be overheard. Let's go through the drive-thru at McDonald's, I said. Then we can take our breakfast and eat it on one of the picnic tables at the Jackson City Park. Since no one will bother us there if there is anyone around. That's perfect, Ruth said. I unlocked the passenger side of the truck and let her get in, then walked around to the other side and climbed in. She opened up about herself, and I learned she wasn't dating. Is it because of the type of people you end up dealing with has kind of soured you on having a serious relationship? I asked. Ruth thought about it for a while, and it wasn't till we had picked up our order that she responded. Your question may have hit my situation in the bullseye, Ruth said. In my line of work, you see the reality of our world. To start a relationship, I think we all start it by wearing our own version of rose-colored glasses. A lot of logic in that comment, I said. When I discovered my wife's image on those emails, I started looking at our relationship and I learned a lot of things, and the way they happened didn't seem to add up. I guess you could say I learned how to take my glasses off. I believe you're going to be telling me that what I suspect is right. And what is your gut telling you? Ruth asked. That my wife and her friends were recruited while attending Penn State, I said, then sent here to set this area up. They are high-class hookers trained to service the powerful or those who can influence things. Pretty close. Each lady is only allowed to have 4 clients, Ruth said. The clients are upper class. Your wife, for example, comes from a pretty powerful group. One is a federal district judge who makes almost $200,000 a year. The second is our local representative in the Senate. The third is the chief of surgeons at Southeast Hospital, and her fourth was our district supervisor until his arrest this morning. By this time, we had reached the park. Climbing out of my truck, we took our food and coffee and sat down at the bench. Interpol took down the overseas end of the international operation last week, Ruth said. They were able to get everything. Each client was charged $4,000 a month, of which they kept $500. The ladies got the rest tax-free. Your wife was at the top of the chain. All who took the bait were screened. A lot of them got online sex talk and nothing more. Their major moneymakers were the ladies like your wife. I guess my face said it all because Ruth said, her books are what you believe them to be, her diary. That part of her living is legit. We still haven't located her offshore account yet, but we know she's been in the business for 8 years. Just over 6 at this location. There are over 6,000 of these high-class hooker females being taken down worldwide. It was being operated by the Russian mafia. I'm here to give you a heads up, Ruth said. Your wife and her lady friends will be arrested at the gym this morning and charged with trade, tax evasion, and criminal fraud. It's all being thrown in together under the RICO Act. They all will be doing major time. I was torn apart, but I said, I got to get tested to make sure I do not have an STD and find a good divorce lawyer. 2 more things: we have had a reward offered on this group for a long time. You will be given $700,000 once we get a successful conviction, Ruth said. The next 2 weeks are going to be super busy for both of us, but afterward, I would like to get to know you a lot better. Ruth, I would like that too. I think I'm going to lose a few friends when this all comes out. I dropped her off at her office, watched her go to her vehicle and unlock the trunk. She put on her holster, vest, and hang her badge so it was visible. I wound down my side window. She walked towards me and said, I'm part of the team that's going to arrest your wife. Any message for her? Just tell her that it was the information I provided you because of what I found in my email, I said. That has taken them all down. I just might do that, Ruth said with a smile. Because it was the system they used that brought them all down. Once arriving at home, I texted both of my wife's best friend's husbands saying that the 3 of us were 3 blind mice and that our wives were all being arrested by the FBI this morning. If they wanted to know what I knew, they could call after 2 p.m. I set the alarm for 2 p.m. I shut the phone off and went to sleep. I got up at 2 thanks to the alarm and had a shower first thing. I turned on my cell phone. I had 5 voice messages on my answering service. 1 from Ruth, 1 from each of the 2 husbands, 1 from my mother, and 1 from my employer. The company, when I returned the call, had heard of the arrest and offered me the night off. I took it. I told him I would call the group leader to inform him what needed to be done, and then would go on Friday night to set up things for the weekend so no production time would be wasted. I called Ruth, who told me that the 3 ladies had been taken to St. Louis and would remain in custody until their bail hearing, which was set for Monday. She asked me if I was available to go out for supper. I said I had to respond to the other blind mice's call before I could answer that. After 2 more quick phone calls, the other females' husbands would be over to find out what I knew at 3 p.m. I called my mother and learned my wife's arrest had made the lunch hour news. I promised her I would stop over on Friday to tell both my parents what I knew before I went into work. After calling Ruth to say that supper was on, she said she would text me with a time and the place as soon as she was free. I still had half an hour, so I went through my wife's personal dresser and makeup table for the first time in my life. It took most of that time to discover the well-hidden little notebook with a routing code for bank transfers from her overseas accounts to our local bank. It showed its current balance. I knew I should give it to Ruth, but first I was going to have a chat with my computer-savvy coworker. Ben and George showed up together. Both looked like I felt. All 3 of us had our lives, as we knew, pulled from beneath us. After giving them a beer, we sat down, and I told them everything from making the New Year's resolution until now. So, you suspected, Ben said, but had nothing to go on until this morning. That's right, I said. Even at first the FBI believed that the images of our wives had been stolen and were being used. Shit. And if you had have said anything, it would have blown up in your face, George added. All 3 of us were dubbed from the start. The FBI agent I have been dealing with, I said, told me we were the 3 blind mice and that for now, it needed to stay that way. Based on what has been revealed to me today, I can understand why. It was mostly done that way for our own protection. The question now is, when will we learn anything new? Ben asked. The ladies' bail hearing will be held Monday, I said. Since it's such an international case, I can suspect a major news release tomorrow morning from the FBI in Washington. The agent told me they were making arrests all across the country today. I'm going to hire my divorce lawyer tomorrow. Does anyone have an idea why our wives picked us? Asked George. My gut tells me this was all set up during Obama presidency, I said. when many things were done because people were looking away. Even in our society today, we are barely touching the surface of what they were doing. The more I learn, the more I believe we will never know what was being done because the Democrats are throwing everything against the current administration to keep the truth from being found. Our wives picked us because of our political view made it impossible for anyone to believe that we would fall for what we have, I added. We were too trusting and accepted what they said without question. All three of us are conservatives by nature, but we have a liberal point of view towards the conduct of others, I explained. We follow the law because of our respect for the law. Those who have another political view feel that the law does not apply to them. That was what allowed the Russian mafia to come in such a way because I think we will find that the liberals were their biggest customers. You got the right, Jack. We at the state police department have found that 3/4 of the crimes committed are committed by liberal-minded or hardcore Democrats who believe they are above the law, Ben said. And nothing we say or do is going to change their minds. Not even having to do time for what they did. Well, Sue Ellen always voted Democrat straight down the line, I said. I voted for the person I thought would do best in that particular position. Her problem was her own greed. She could have walked away, and no one would have known. So could have your wives. They failed to realize that with time, the truth always finds a way to come out. I then pulled out and showed them the book that I found hidden and said, "This appears to be the codes for my wife's offshore accounts. I'm not sure, but I am going to have it checked out by someone I trust before I turn it over to the FBI on Friday. You might want to go home and search your house tonight because once I turn it over, you most likely be served with a search warrant. Once the Fed has it, they will seize the funds as proceeds of crime," Ben said. "Can you wait till Monday morning before turning it over?" "Yes, I can, but we never talked about this, did we?" I asked. "And we voluntarily turn over what we find to the field office on Monday morning before our wives' bail hearing." "Talk about what?" they both said with huge grins. The address Ruth had given me was not a restaurant, so I used Google Maps to direct me. It turned out it was her private residence. I was surprised to find it was a nice-looking home from the outside. I would like to be able to say we discussed business, but we didn't. It was a get-to-know-you-a-bit-better time. I ended up leaving about 11 p.m. with plans to get together on Saturday. After leaving her place, I headed over to the plant to check on things. I talked to the group leader who gave me his approval to take to the computer geek since he was way ahead on his project. I took him up to the office that overlooked the work floor below. Once I explained what had happened and what I found, he went to work using the web to reveal what he could find. The web address took us to the bank where we punched in a bunch of numbers and bingo, her account appeared. It shocked us both to learn how much she was sitting on. Within half an hour, he had transferred 20% out of 4 different accounts and had it backdated 3 days. With my permission, he took out the amount needed to pay off his mortgage. He opened up 2 new accounts at a different offshore bank for him and me. Your wife had invested her funds wisely and bought some major stock back in the day cheaply, he said. The FBI will have a hard time seizing this if they can. When you turn it over to them, explain that under state law that what is in these accounts is community property. That gives you the legal right to half of it. In divorce court, if it comes up, you just say you had this done to protect some of your equity. I could not have done it without your help, I freely admitted. So, thank you in advance. I sent out a text message to Ben and George as to what I had learned. I worked for 3 or 4 hours laying out the production schedule for the weekend to make sure there was no downtime for anyone before going home. For some reason, I couldn't get to sleep for a long time. I guess I had too much on my mind. I got up around 7 and flipped the channels on the TV, looking for any national updates that were available to glean. None of the regular news stations had any information, but MSNBC announced that there would be a press release at 11 a.m. that morning from FBI headquarters. I decided it would be best if I watched it at my parents' house. It was sad watching the press release from the FBI as they discussed how they had taken down an international cartel dealing in blackmail, trade, and other numerous crimes. 45 major cities had been hit, 625 counties, in all 52 states. The clients were all upper class in society and had political influences. The cases where blackmail was involved was to get charges squashed or changes made to laws to make things easier for the criminal organization. Over 1,000 people were charged with trade. 75% were females and 25% were male. There were further ongoing investigations. The criminal organization operated primarily in Democratic-controlled areas of the country and had been in business for over 10 years. No particular gender was concentrated on. What was highlighted was the sexual desires of the clients they were serving and their lifestyle. The organization was in 25 countries, primarily operating in countries that had some sort of a democracy type of government. It was set up and ran by the Russian mafia operating out of Belize. MSNBC pulled up a list of the top 30 Democratic cities in the USA and confirmed that they were all on the list of where FBI takedowns had taken place. It was upsetting to have to listen to the commentators claim that this was a hit job set up by President Trump to take the public's attention off of his other problems. The fact that this criminal operation was set up under a Democratic president's administration was not mentioned once after the FBI had concluded its press release. My dad, now totally pissed off, took the remote and changed to the other cable news channels, only to discover, as he said, the same type of shit. They were all blaming Trump for the corruption the FBI had uncovered. In frustration, my mom said, "Just turn the propaganda channels off and let Jack tell us what he knows. At least what he tells us will be the truth as he knows it." Well, Mika Brzezinski, the co-host of Morning Joe, says that President Trump's efforts to undermine the media's influence and control what people think is undermining effectively what is the media's job to do, I said. You can go to YouTube and see the clip as if it was broadcast live, I said. Out of the horse's mouth, we learn how truthful the media is. As a news organization, it's their job to control what their views believe. That explains why most of the media hates our president, my dad said. He sees through their mistruths. Didn't Mika and Joe used to be his friends when he was a Democrat? So bottom line, this whole 3 year of anti-Trump shit is because the Democratic Party and the mass media see our president as a turncoat and a traitor. Mom said, it's the worst insult to all of them is to see in the White House. So, because of their hate for those who have left the Democratic Party, they have done everything they could to destroy him, even if it means hurting society and hiding the truth. Enough talking about the hate. They have, I said. The truth has never mattered in the public society and never will. If it did, we would a completely different society. So, I started explaining how it all started and what happened to this point. When I was done, there was nothing but silence for a few minutes. I am so sorry, son, my mother said. I had no idea that when I was setting you up with Sue Ellen, I was setting you up with a hooker. Mom, none of us knew, I said. No use looking back at what ifs or I should have. There's nothing to be gained by doing that. We made the best decision we could with what we knew at that time. So, let's promise to ourselves that we are not going to waste time questioning our own conduct. I asked my mom for the yellow pages, and I started looking for a lawyer. Finding one, I called and made an appointment for 2 o'clock. I left my parents' home knowing that my mother would carry the feelings of guilt for the rest of her life. After getting out of the divorce lawyer's office, I went into the walk-in clinic in Jackson and got in within 30 minutes. The doctor drew the blood needed for the test to be done. His only comment was, if I was you, I would be doing the same thing. I had gone back to work and was in my office following up on what I had done the night before. I had gone through the whole plant, checking on the progress of each person's assigned project, answering any questions they had, and giving a few of my own. The group leader knocked on the door and I said, "Come on in." The staff asked me to ask you if there's anything they can do, he said. Off the record, they think the world of you because you show a genuine interest in what they do. Every time they make a suggestion to make their job easier, you find a way to get it done. Well, having worked the floor for years, I knew how frustrating it is to have the tools or supplies I needed to get things done in a steady manner, I said. We have a good crew. By paying attention to what they need, we have increased our productivity greatly. The day shift manager has been instructed to pick up a few of my management styles. Just thank our team for me for caring enough to ask, and let them know if I need their help, they will be the first I come to. Sometimes it's the littlest of gestures that hit home the most. I was thankful for being alone because what I had been holding in came out. I just sat there letting it go before getting back to the task at hand. It was well into the wee hours of the morning before I went home. Ruth Truscott was waiting for me when I showed up. We headed out to Hickory House for breakfast. She noticed that my wedding band was gone. Neither one of us had seen the Arch in St. Louis, so we decided to head up there for the day. After that, we went to the St. Louis Zoo. It was about 3 in the afternoon when Ruth asked me if I wanted to talk to Sue Ellen. I thought about it for a few, then I said perhaps I should because she needed to hear she had no home to come home to. I had to wait for Sue Ellen to be escorted to the visitor's room. It made me smile to see her wearing orange. It was apparent that she no longer looked like the little dainty Southern girl she had presented herself as. The facade she had created for herself had been destroyed for good. I had to ask myself if our whole existence had been an illusion she had created to aid her in the cover-up of who and what she was. She sat down and picked up the phone as I looked at her through the glass with a touch of sadness. It was now clear to me that our whole life together had been a lie. It was me, I said, who gave the FBI the information that helped to take the organization you worked with down. It began back in January when I started cleaning up my junk email files. How? She asked. The Instagirls emails that were sent out daily, I said. 3 of them had pictures of Beth, Kathy, And you from your Penn State days. I was getting an average of 6 a day. I tried to unsubscribe them but couldn't because Windows Outlook had marked them as unsafe. That Sunday when we had them over for dinner, I took your pictures so that I could take them to the FBI. Until then I thought they had to be stolen images. Within a week I knew that my belief was wrong. I'm sorry, Sue Ellen said. My mistake was that I fell in love with you. The original plan was to divorce the three of you after 2 years. I don't believe you when you say you fell in love with me, I said. I believe the only thing you're sorry for is getting caught. By the way, Ben, George and I had search warrants served on us. The FBI found the books in which you all had the information on your offshore bank accounts. I think they're going to seize the funds in them. It was fun to watch Sue Ellen's face go white. The knowledge that her real life's earning may be all for naught had to be hurting. You will be served with divorce papers in the next few days, I said. Your clients are all under arrest, and their careers are over. I do have one question for you. Why did your friends and you choose the three of us to be your patsies? For the first time in her life, Sue Ellen didn't know what to say, so I repeated the question a second time. After about 5 minutes, she said, when we were recruited into the industry, we were given classes for weeks on human behavior. One of the things our instructors focused on was one's political beliefs. We were taught that we wanted only clients who were liberal inclined because they would justify what they were doing with a temperament that would be to our benefit. Their personalities showed that if it was against the law, it was the law that was wrong, not what they were doing. Liberals also are known for accepting the lies as the truth because they, in general, they don't question anything. So, their view was what's good for me is acceptable, I said, whether or not if society agrees with it or not. Partly, but you have simplified it too much, Sue said. Liberals live in their own bubble, and usually it has nothing to do with reality. Most liberals have the feeling that the law was not written for them. That's how they justify everything. We didn't realize that when we got involved with the three of you that you weren't liberals. We were too focused on the fact that your lifestyle fit into ours perfectly. It provided us with a cover we thought would never be broken. With that said, I replied, we were three blind mice running after wives who by their conduct had cut off our tails with a carving knife. Goodbye, Sue Ellen. Any further communication will be done through the lawyers. Don't try to come back to the house as my lawyer is getting a restraining order because of your connection to the Russian mafia. I hung up the phone. I had got my answers, even if I didn't like them. Within minutes, I was back in my truck with Ruth. Jack, are you okay? Ruth asked in concern. It's hard when you realize that the lady you married never loved you, I said. The three of us were chosen because of our work schedule provided them with a perfect cover for what they were doing. Nothing more, nothing less. Ouch, I know it's going to be rough for a few days, Ruth said. Perhaps finding out makes it easier to move on. I started moving on when I believed she was selling herself, I said. Ruth opened the glove box. Inside you will find an envelope I was going to drop off Monday. It's a notebook that I found going through Sue Ellen's personal stuff. I believe it will lead you to her offshore accounts. Ruth opened it up, and as she was skimming through it, I said, Ben and George are looking for their wives' records. If they find it, they will be delivering it first thing on Monday. I may have been told the truth today, but knowing it and hearing verified still hurts. I listened as Ruth made a phone call on her cell phone to inform a supervisor about the discovery and how she obtained it. When she got off the phone, she started to laugh. Keep it in mind, I said. These accounts will be brought up in divorce court because Missouri is a 50-50 state. Jack, my supervisor, suggested that I recruit you to our team, Ruth said. Thanks to you, they will be going to have to do a lot of work to get the authority to do searches on those who we have arrested homes. We were headed back on the interstate talking about things in general when her cell phone buzzed again. I heard one side of the phone conversation. It was her mom wanting to know if she was coming for dinner. Ruth explained that she was with a Jack Daniel Patterson heading back from St. Louis. Then came the normal questions about who I was, what was our relationship, what we were doing in St. Louis, and if I was coming to dinner with her. Ruth said, look, Mom, we are just at the friends stage. A few minutes later, she looked at me, rolled her eyes, and said, you want to come for dinner? I nodded my head in the affirmative. She mouthed, thanked. What brought that all on? I asked Ruth when she got off the phone. The shock my mother went into when my mother learned that I was with a man, and it was not related to work, she said with a laugh. Be prepared for the 1,000 question evening. I don't think your mother will get much of a chance to question me, I said. After your stepfather finds out where I work. I was right. As soon as Ruth's stepfather found out where I worked, I was lost to Ruth and her mother as he got caught up with what was going on at the plant. It was interesting to learn that the general manager was retiring, and it was a toss-up who was going to be offered that position. With the pressure being put on by upper management on the day shift day manager, he thought that I was on the inside. The ease I had the night shift running had really impressed upper management. Complaints from the employees under me were non-existent. Ruth's stepfather asked me how I met Ruth, so I explained the whole situation to him. I found his insight into my situation quite enlightening. He too had met his current wife when his world was being turned upside down. For them, it had been a good 20 years. It was almost 11 p.m. by the time I dropped Ruth off at home. I found that I had really enjoyed her company, and we had agreed to get together next Friday. Sunday, the three blind mice got together. I told the boys about my meeting with Sue Ellen and my feelings about it. Neither Ben or George had been in to see their wives. They liked the fact that I was going for a restraining order because of who she was working for. It had been a busy week at work. Sue Ellen and her best female friends had been refused bail because of the possibility of being a flight risk. I was surprised to find that not only had Sue Ellen agreed to the divorce, she had readily accepted the terms. It was agreed that I would put her personal items in storage in a rental unit obtained by her lawyer. My lawyer expected Judge Donald McDonald to sign off on it if I appeared before him in court. So, Friday afternoon I was picking up a couple of bundles of boxes to start boxing up her stuff. Her vehicle had already been taken by her lawyer's office to a consignment dealer to be sold off. I bought a small locked box for Sue Ellen's good jewelry, which I placed in it and delivered it directly to her lawyer's office and had them provide me with a written letter that I had done that. Ruth and I spent the weekend together. We find we were getting closer. Ruth told me that my soon-to-be ex-wife and her two best friends were trying to work out a deal. What was complicating it for Sue Ellen was my claim to half of her illegally earned revenue. The FBI had learned that they were all legal citizens of Belize and would never be able to recover any of the money she had earned on her back without her cooperation. As soon as I got Sue Ellen's personal items to the storage unit, I put the house up for sale. I wanted to get rid of the past and put it permanently behind me. It took 3 months for the divorce to get done. Sue Ellen had to do 3 years in the Fed system before she would be released, and then she would be kicked out of the country. Her lawyer presented me with a check from her trust for what the divorce judge had awarded me. I finally got an offer on my place and I accepted it. I had won the farm next to my parents in the divorce settlement and had given legal notice to the tenants. Ruth and I were getting serious, so we agreed on what we wanted to have done to the house before moving into it. It was the last weekend of the summer that two things happened. At the end of the summer company picnic, it was announced that I was becoming the new general manager. It was a Monday to Friday work week with evening and weekends off. With her mother and stepfather at the company picnic, I got down on one knee and proposed to Ruth Truscott. Of course, she said yes. What happened to Sue Ellen and her friends, well, that's another story. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.